What up, everybody? Power Season 4, we got our first look at the Italian Mafia in the Power universe as Ghost was in jail without being given bond, being charged with the murder of federal agent Gregory Knox. Ghost was locked up with old-time mobster Tony Teresi, who was part of the Ragni crime family, and instead of snitching like most of the guys from his era, Teresi held it down and was doing his time until eventually being released after agreeing to get information on Tommy and James. But Teresi ended up being Tommy's father, who Kate told him was dead, and this gave Tommy the introduction to the Ragni crime family himself. We also got a look into another mafia family in Season 6 of Power, Joe Proctor's father's side of the family, the Savello mob, who are the reason Tommy left New York in the first place. But over 20 years before this, the man who taught Ghost and Tommy the game, Kanan Stark, his mother, was also dealing with the Italian Mafia. First as enemies, dealing with the New Jersey side of the Italian Mafia after moving her operation into Jersey. But later connecting and becoming friends with the leader of the Italian Mafia, New York boss Stefano Marchetti. And also connecting with him to get a plug to get back in the game moving heroin, a Vietnamese man named Quan. In the movie American Gangster, Frank Lucas went directly to Southeast Asia himself to get a plug directly at the source in Thailand, then using the US Army to transport his heroin back into the United States during the Vietnamese War. This also created problems with the Italian Mafia because he went over their heads and directly to the source, making him more powerful than the mob at the time. In Power Book 2 Ghost Season 3, we were introduced to a British woman named Noma. Very powerful and had an entire warehouse of product she needed moved. Noma was Mecca's fiance and plug, who didn't know that Mecca was in New York chasing after Monet while he was engaged to her. So after Mecca's death, Noma showed up to the States looking for answers. At this point is when she connected with the crew as an attempt to replace Mecca. After getting business moving, Tariq, Effie, and Braden took a trip to Italy with RSJ for a meeting with a tech company for Weston Holdings. And while at lunch in Italy planning their trip out, Noma showed up out of nowhere with her goon Obi, demanding that they retrieve a listening device from her ex-husband Francesco Lombardi's mansion. Lombardi stood at the top of the food chain in organized crime and was Noma's biggest competitor in arms dealing, and also had a legitimate front as an oil tycoon. Lombardi did such a good job living his double life, he was able to throw exclusive parties that only the very elite could get invited to. And a man doesn't reach the very top of the crime food chain in Italy without being connected to the very top of the Italian Mafia, the Sicilian mob, Cosa Nostra. And while in Italy, Effie discovered that Noma also had a child with Lombardi, Anya Covington, who we later found out was already grown and the same age as Tariq. So around 15 to 20 years ago in the early 2000s, Noma was married to Lombardi, someone who stands at the top of the Italian Mafia. And right before Lombardi got shot, he was questioning Tariq about if Tariq worked for Mecca, and if he sent him for the listening device. So this tells us that Lombardi knew Mecca at one point, but the two also became rivals as Mecca began working for Noma after she split up with Lombardi. So I believe while Noma was married to Lombardi, Mecca worked for Lombardi at some point, and Noma started having an affair with Mecca. And it was also revealed in Season 4 of Book 2 that Noma is promiscuous, sleeping with both Kane and Davis. But this led to Noma and Mecca coming up with a plan to steal Lombardi's connection and get into the game herself, while also using Anya, Lombardi's only child, as leverage. This would mean that Tariq using Anya as leverage against Noma wouldn't be the first time that Anya was used as leverage in a battle over power, because Noma used the fact that Lombardi wouldn't kill her daughter's mother as a way to steal all his connections and become a boss. And we know that Lombardi and Noma have the same arms connect. But I also believe that Noma also got connected with the drug supplier for the Italian mafia, who, like I began this video talking about, like what we saw in Raising Kanan, is most likely in Southeast Asia. I also say this because in episode 5, Monet and Drew robbed one of Noma's shipments. And the group who got robbed by the Tejadas was again none other a group of Asians. So we know that Noma is connected with the mob through Lombardi, and her drug supply is most likely coming from South Asia. In season 4, we found out how Noma was so easily able to track Tariq when he was on his trip in Italy. And that's because Noma was actually living full-time in Italy at the time. But in season 4, she had to move to the States because she killed Lombardi. Because not only is the Italian government looking into Lombardi's death, there's also a good chance that the Sicilian mob is also looking into who killed Lombardi. That's why Noma thought Tariq was a genius to lure Lombardi out to the middle of nowhere where she could take him out, because she was also able to keep her hands clean. But Noma also has a problem right now as she tries to migrate to the US, and that is her US citizenship. And while Noma's been in the US, we also found out that Noma's legit front is that she owns a private jet part business that gets government contracts. But because of her relocating to the US, this business is having some problems. And that's why we saw Davis McLean telling her about Wiley Adams. When we were first introduced to Noma, we also got a look into how she rose to the top of the game. She told Tariq and them that Mecca had federal protection, that he snitched on all her rivals, and kept her off the Fed's radar. In episode 1 of season 4, Junior Young had been digging into Tariq after being left a flash drive that supposedly came from Saks, either though the timeline doesn't add up like I've talked about in other videos. But on this flash drive was information about Congressman Tate getting green cards for Obi's family. When Junior found Tariq and started questioning him about this, he brought up Noma and called Noma the piece that they couldn't nail before. We know this is because Mecca was protecting her, which also directly benefited himself at the same time because Mecca ran Noma's entire empire. In season 4, episode 1, Noma told Obi that Mecca was supposed to be on the front lines for her, and without him serving as the middleman, she is now exposed. Before Mecca's death, she was able to operate in the shadows, almost like a ghost. This lets us know that either though Noma has no problems getting her hands dirty, like we saw when she retrieved the blue diamond ring, when she killed Lombardi, or even when she killed Obi, but she prefers to be in the comfort of luxury, keeping her hands clean and relying on her goons to do her dirty work. Because notice the thing about all those times I mentioned about Noma getting her hands dirty is that she wasn't alone like Ghost or Tommy would be, or even like we've seen Rock doing dirt by herself. Noma always has her soldiers with her each time. So now that Noma has lost Mecca, who stood on the front lines for her, and Obi, who Noma even admitted herself he served her faithfully, Noma is more exposed than ever, with Tariq targeting her daughter, while also being completely reliant on Cain Tejada. The question to ask now, is this the end of Noma? Will Cain turn his back on her and take her out? Or will Tariq get to Noma and take her out? Or could it even be a wild card like Effie or Anya, or possibly even the Italian mafia coming back into play and getting revenge for Noma taking out Lombardi? Leave your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments.